Starseed, the Third Millennium, Living in a Post-Historic World by Ken Carey. Preface. It was December 27th, 1978. I was in bed with a fever, yet I felt more elated than ill. Something about the consciousness I was swimming in, living, being in, seemed strangely familiar, as if my vision were coming into focus after a lifetime of double images. Without the calm, reasoning guidance of the voice I heard speaking to me, I am not sure I would have made it through this stage. But someone, or something, was helping me along, identifying itself as a part of me that I had forgotten, an eternal part. It said, "I am a spirit being in the eternal fields of light. I am you, as you remain beyond material illusion, as you were, will be, and are now, before and after the spell of matter." My handwriting being quite illegible, my only method of recording anything of the amazing stream of consciousness I had somehow stumbled upon was to type what I could of it on an old Royal portable typewriter that my brother-in-law found sitting on the curbside one day as he made his rounds as a garbage collector in Darien, Connecticut. But it was a strange sort of communication, unsettling at first. I found myself experiencing a consciousness radically different from anything I had ever before encountered, and it was too close for comfort. It felt as if something enormous were looking through my eyes, seeing the same room I saw every day, but interpreting it so differently. Mathematically, it seemed, that I hardly recognized even the most familiar of my daily objects. The thoughts, the ideas, the scope of the images, I was not used to thinking in such terms. I was unprepared and not always able to follow the logic. I balked in outright disbelief when the voice first suggested that this was some kind of extraterrestrial intelligence I was encountering, an explanation that even now I do not accept without qualification. But despite the fact that my mind frequently lagged behind, on an emotional level, my heart and soul were experiencing a blissful, almost sexual feeling of fulfillment. I felt a peace that I could not account for, a sense of well-being deeper than I had ever known. When I understood what was being said, it was so wonderful that I felt like a child on Christmas morning. In a strange way, it was almost as if I were remembering things rather than being told them. It was all I could do to keep my fingers in the vicinity of the ancient machine that, thanks to a generous dose of WD-40, was continuously tapping out some partial account of the thoughts that were rippling wave-like through my awareness. Several times I forgot to put wood in the stove until my numb feet reminded me of the winter creeping in under the door. When this experience continued into the second day, I told my wife, Sherry, that although I did not understand what was going on, I felt a need to follow through with it and see where it was leading. I asked her to make sure that I was not disturbed for the next few days. "If our friends or neighbors come over," I said, "ask them to come back another time. I need to be isolated until this process, whatever it is complete." That night, 6 inches of wet snow blanketed the forest around our home. By morning, all the younger pine trees along both sides of the 1-mile dirt road that ends in our yard had bent over under the snow's weight. There must have been 100 of them bowing protectively across the road when I looked out the window the next morning. Since we had no electricity, television, or radio in those days, the snow-laden trees effectively cut off all access to the outside world, and they remained that way until the transmissions were complete. The fact that I had not previously known how to type must have been overlooked in the swirl of heightened consciousness, for when I awoke on the morning of January 6, 1979, there were 350 double-spaced, typewritten pages stacked upon my desk, and my life had forever and irreversibly changed. Throughout those 11 days, as I was typing the notes that would later be published as the Starseed transmissions, I was told again and again by the entities who were blending with me that a much stronger surge of telepathic awareness was to be pulsed into the collective field of human consciousness between the years 1987 and 1989. It was emphasized that this would be far more powerful than the thought signals I was then receiving. This prediction turned out to be as precise as if it had been drawn from a moon calendar or a table of the tides. 10 years later, during that same period, telepathic messages began coming in, like subtle music in the background of my thought at first, then stronger, and finally with such power that I decided to stop everything and begin recording them. Since what I had captured on paper in the earlier Starseed transmissions was such a small percentage of the overall information flow I had received, I had resolved by this time to be better prepared. By speaking aloud into a tape recorder while receiving this present material of this book, I was able to bypass the manual distractions of the typewriter and translate much more of the awareness into spoken word. Afterward, precise word-for-word transcription on a word processor brought into printed form a far more detailed and substantial account of the consciousness flow than had been possible 10 years earlier. Admittedly, my process was still not perfect. I still had to stop now and then to put a log in the stove or adjust the window, but my distractions were kept to a minimum, and I am very happy with the result, which I am pleased to share with you in the form of this book. It was written during a season of global miracles. No local snowstorm this time. In the 1970s, I needed the validation of that dramatically timed snow cover to remind me that I lived in an intelligent and benevolent universe. Now I wonder how I could have ever forgotten. But what exactly is this process? I have yet to find a single word that adequately describes it. After a decade of hearing the term channeling bantered about, I am convinced that it does not apply to the process through which I access this information. I know many people who regularly tap into this awareness, and I expect they would agree. There is no trance involved in my reception of these thoughts, no loss of consciousness, no voice exchange or foreign accent. I myself am fully present throughout the experience. During the months that followed the recording of those first Starseed transmissions, I began to realize that accessing higher frequency awareness is actually an organic process, a natural ability with which every child is born. I have since devoted several years to studying preschool children, and though my work is not scientific and far from conclusive, I am personally convinced that this inborn ability usually atrophies with the acquisition of language. As children develop language skills, they acquire the prevalent cultural belief that if it cannot be put into words, it is not real, or at least has no value or relevance. Since higher frequency thought, or what is sometimes called metapersonal thought, is entirely non-verbal, as children are inculcated with cultural values, they gradually stop noticing that they are living in a veritable ocean of non-verbal awareness. Can you imagine something so prevalent that it is entirely forgotten? As in the joke in which the student fish asks the philosopher fish, "What is this ocean you keep talking about?" But perhaps atrophy is too strong a word. The ability to access higher frequency thought can be reactivated. In a few cases, like my own, that reactivation occurs by accident. But as thousands of letters bundled in our storeroom attest, it can also be reactivated intentionally. The central chapters of this book take a closer look at this. They are sufficiently detailed to provide those interested with the basic tools of understanding required to regain their spirit world sensitivity. Once you know what to look for, it is not difficult. It is essentially a matter of listening, of sensing, of feeling more fully, of opening to frequencies of thought that are normally filtered out of awareness. I experience it as a process of relaxing into a more generalized and more generous definition of self, a sort of spreading out, as it were, into a larger field of awareness. That larger field of awareness includes my center of human individuality, but it includes other centers of individuality as well. I experience these as aspects of myself, not my human self, but that deeper, eternal self that all creatures share. Call the process what you will, channeling, creative thinking, visioning, or simply perceiving more fully. It has opened me up to ways of considering reality that I am certain would not otherwise have occurred to me. In practical realms, such as relationships, child-rearing, gardening, and finance, it has introduced ingenious perspectives and creative interpretations that have proven themselves again and again. I sometimes wonder how different the course of my life might have been had I learned to listen earlier to these inner frequencies. So much has changed since those 11 magical winter days. When I recorded the original Starseed transmissions, I was a rural carpenter who had been supporting a family for the past 6 years on an income of less than 1/3 of what was then officially defined as the U.S. poverty level. Our garden and milk cow ensured that we always had plenty of wholesome food, and though Sherry and I put in long hours, we were both relatively content. I enjoyed my work and anticipated a future along similar lines. Today my life is so different, so radically altered, that at times I flash back to those pre-Starseed days and recall them with the black and white associations usually reserved for old photographs. Even now I can hardly explain the change. It was like suddenly poking my head up through the clouds to see the sunlight for the first time, or discovering a vast new world beyond the cultural stage props that had previously defined my reality. Something happens to you when you begin to think about this planet as a single living organism. And when you begin to live in that awareness, nothing is ever again quite the same. Nothing can be the same after that. Nations begin to look like people, like familiar friends. The distinctions between religion, biology, and politics begin to blur. I began to wonder why I had always assumed that human thought was the only kind of thought, as if nature would be content with a single species of flower or just one kind of tree. Whether or not you accept my own premise that the current of consciousness recorded in the following chapters is of angelic or extraterrestrial origin should in no way affect your experience of this book. The perspectives presented here are designed to stimulate your own processes of thought and understanding. Their purpose is catalytic, to trigger memory and awaken higher dimensional sensitivity. I recommend taking your time before drawing too many conclusions about this material. Many of my own assumptions proved invalid as I became more immersed in the consciousness behind the words. We take identity too seriously. It isn't a fixed commodity like a table or a chair. Healthy individuality is a fluid, flowing focus of awareness, adjusting naturally to the ever-changing contours of time. It knows itself as one of many eyes of eternity, coalescing in an infinite sea of shared beingness. Individuals come and go like the waves of the sea, but at their core, each one of us is first and foremost the sea, and only secondly a wave. Cultural programming prevents us from realizing this. It discourages true individuality. There have been a few genuine individuals during historical time, but not many. And those, of course, were individual because they knew the eternal being of the sea as their core. Some of the views and principles presented here may be new to you, others more familiar, but experiment with them, apply them, see if they work. Let your own experience determine their degree of relevance. None of them are presented as absolute statements of truth. Truth does not lend itself to absolutes, linguistically or otherwise. The world has seen enough dogmatism. This book is about spirit. It is written for people of spirit. If these words help even just a few of us to become more aware, they will have served their purpose. Ken Carey, Greenwood Forest, Missouri. Chapter 1. The boundaries of time. Listening out of doors in a quiet, natural setting perhaps under a tree, alongside a brook, or near the seashore will greatly enhance your experience of what follows. A quote from the Starseed transmissions from December 31st, 1978. The last of our communications to take place on conceptual levels will be sent during the years 1987 and 1989. This will be a truly momentous time, a time when the first contractions of planetary birth are unmistakable. In these pages, we address you in a succession of different modes to ensure every possibility of your understanding and to maximize your opportunities to catch these thought currents and ride them beyond mere words to remembrance of your eternal nature and your root purpose for currently being incarnate on earth in human form. Therefore, we speak to you at times as if you were still sleeping beneath the blankets of material plane illusion. For, in fact, this is the present state of the human majority. At other times, we speak to you as if you yourself were the one who is awakening into the collective field of human consciousness. This is also valid. It is how you will soon understand the I of selfness behind your outer roles and images. To the extent that you oscillate back and forth, at times experiencing moments of lucidity and oneness with the universal field of awareness, and at times lapsing back into the familiar thought patterns of the prevailing cultural mythology, you will find both forms of address of equal value. Allow your understanding of who you are to relax as you move through these pages. The historical limitations in which you have defined yourself are no longer valid. Indeed, they never were. Your eternal nature is much greater than the conceptions of time in which you have kept it defined. Release all that you are from the prison of your self-concepts, so that we might become one in your understanding, as we have always been one in reality. Allow present moment awareness to flow freely among your thoughts. You have created your body as a terrestrial terminal for the habitation of eternal awareness. You have designed eyes to interpret a portion of your energy spectrum and ears to interpret another portion. You have created 5 senses to have a window into these times upon this world that, biologically clothed, you might better monitor and interact with these physical dimensions. You can no longer afford to sleep in the illusions of this culture, allowing the wonders of sensory input to confuse your sense of beingness with the information you receive. The times you live in require the activation of the full range of your eternal capacities. These times call now, as we do, for your birth. When you define yourself without regard to your source in the eternal presence out of which this universe unfolds, when you continue to play out variations of the historical theme, which keep your eternal spirit at arm's length by imagining absolute others in the world around you. The illusions of the material realm weigh heavily upon your consciousness. Forces that were intended only to hold energy firmly within atomic structure also bind and limit your perception. Your outlook becomes sober. Your vision blurs beneath the emotional mists of excessive subjectivity. As gravity draws objects to fall, so too does it draw the thoughts of those who define themselves without reference to the source. And with their thoughts, their identities fall as well, back into matter again and again. So it was said to the first egos who began to think of themselves in this fictitious way, "In dust you have conceived yourselves, and to dust you will return." For all thought is dust in the minds of those who deny the reality that seeks birth in the manger of human form. When you define yourself in isolation, your senses deceive and blind you. They lock you into a fractional perception of the universe in which you live. Cultural illusions become your reality, filtering and misinterpreting everything you perceive. Like looking through murky glass, they intervene between you and your understanding of self and world. They cut off awareness of your eternal origin and leave you with an inadequate sense of self. In the historical condition, human beings undertake the arduous task of self-definition. To receive assistance in this monumental work, they accept the help of others in their sleeping society, and in time come to think of themselves as a loose assortment of images and illusions, often contradictory, always uninspired. The vibrancy of their eternal presence is blocked by ancestral preconceptions that have not known fundamental change since their forebears huddled in the hollows of the ancient hills. Those who later in life realize the limitations of this poor self-image often seek to improve their image of self. Yet, in undertaking a task that in the natural order belongs solely to the life force itself, they succeed only, if they succeed at all, in remodeling their prison cages. They may replace bars of iron with bars of gold, but the prison remains. Within it, their awareness stays limited and confined. There is but the finest veil between you and full dimensional perception of reality, the filmiest of screens between you and your eternal self. You require no elaborate technique or ritual to release this veil. You need only open to the organic current of awareness that, in every moment, flows to you from the source of all life. When you accept the understanding that accompanies the awareness of your life force, you are defined no longer in the static images of yesterday's experience, but in active universal participation. You know yourself as an agent of the continuing creation that is the great purpose and the great joy of these material realms. Though opening to life force awareness is as easy as relaxation, deliberation is needed to sustain such openness in a society where subconscious patterns continuously beckon you back into their familiar habits. Yet, if your love for reality is sufficiently strong, such deliberation is not difficult. Nothing can stop those whose hearts burn with genuine passion for the truth. And the truth you will discover is worth your passion. For the awareness that accompanies the current of your life is an eternal awareness. It is the awareness of your spirit, your soul. The self-understanding you receive in the experience of your eternal spirit is living, fluid, and organic. You are the creator of all you survey. You understand your body as a system of exquisite biological circuitry designed to project your vision into this material world and bring your awareness into sharp and immediate environmental focus. You know yourself as an expression of universal being, as a cell in the terrestrial body of the One whose consciousness is now awakening in the human family. A consciousness that is ultimately and beautifully your own. One being is the source of all creatures. The life of that being shines through the multiple prisms of diverse worlds, refracting, reflecting, becoming the many, yet remaining ever one in essence, like the colors of a spectrum or the cells of a body. The distinction between you and this being is not absolute, but organic, like the distinction between leaves on a tree, or the distinction between notes that contribute to the harmonies of a song. Behind your individuality, beneath your cultural images of self, that one eternal being is who you are. We bring you these transmissions that you might come to live once again as we do, in full consciousness of your source. All that stands between you and awareness of the being at the source of life can be released as easily as a sigh. Even now you are but a breath away from the subtle perceptual shift that allows your identity to be transformed from solitary individual to the source of every individual, from the object of attention to the very flow of attention itself, from the contents of consciousness to the awareness that brings all content to consciousness. When you know yourself in this way, you recognize the others of your kind. You perceive us. We communicate. As our communication flows into communion, you recognize yourself in us. You awaken to awareness of our common source. We are beings consciously inhabiting the universal presence. In the fields of space and time, we individualize qualities of the same being we share with you, even as you have also individualized other qualities of that being. Though not all of us have chosen, as you have chosen, to dress in human form, still, we are your family within time. Your sisters, your brothers, beyond time, we are one. We are a race of voyagers, spirit beings in the eternal fields of light. Yet we are you yourselves as you would have been had you not succumbed to the spell of matter. We are you as you remain beyond material illusion, addressing in these pages a sleeping part of ourselves, that you might awaken and know this awareness as your own. We would shine the light upon the reality of your presence from behind you, from above you, from beneath you, that at last you might recognize that light within you and awaken. There is only one who sleeps, though that one sleeps beneath 8 billion various blankets of human illusion. And there is only but one who awakens, and awakening wears the blankets of former illusion as transformed robes of luminous biology. There is no word in the English language or any human language that conveys the meaning of I, you, and we simultaneously. Yet it is in this understanding that these transmissions originate, and it is to this understanding that they lead. You are on both sides of this communication, giving and receiving, both forming these thoughts and being informed. We know within us a center of being that is itself beyond time, centered in eternal identity. We are free to travel throughout the realms of past and future. Yet those among us who take on material form always do so in linear time. This is not a limitation. It is the mechanism of creation's frame. No artist would set out to paint a boundaryless canvas that stretched out infinitely into all directions. So it is that we establish the parameters of the manifest worlds, framing each space in the boundaries of time. We have long known that a turning point would come in the unfoldment of this universal art, after which human beings would be our primary means of future creation, as well as the organ of awareness through whom we would interpret and enjoy the material plane. That time is now. We invite you to leave behind your historical impression of the human experience, that you might rise to your natural level of consciousness. Your human body has been designed to allow your self-awareness to ride upon the crest of creation's wave. At that precise breaking point, where the one eternal wave splashes into the many and into their linear worlds of time. As a representative projection of eternity, as a nerve ending of God in matter, you remain conscious of eternal unity, even while experiencing yourself as part of diversity's material robes. To be the one and simultaneously the many, this is your calling, your purpose, and the ultimate destiny of all humanity. You who slumber still beneath the spell of matter, look beyond the descriptions of reality given by those who seek to lead you from without. Open to the living information of the life force that rises within you. This information is alive, and it is the only guidance you require. At the deepest levels of your being, you have always known these things. Behind your roles and societal illusions, you are not separate from the source of life, nor are you cut off from the intelligence who, designing all form and structure, breathes into it in the breath of life that you breathe every day. We who inhabit the fields of light share with you a common spirit. We knew you in the beginning, long before you dressed in robes of soil and stream. In oneness with you, we sent forth the harmonic currents that brought this world into being. Together, we parted the skies and opened the waters of the heavens. Where were you then, if not with us? Together we formed the mountains and river valleys. Together we tapped the well springs of the deep. Together we poured our radiance into this world and quickened her creatures of water, earth, and sky. Come now, let us reunite. Brush away the dusty thoughts of a darker age. Time and space do not revolve around humankind, but our dreams do, and our plans do too. We are depending on you to bring shape and texture to the order that has rested implicit within all creation since before the first starry nebulae illumined dimensional space. We are inviting you to help us bring into physical form the vision that inspires the universe. Do you see, O humans of this present world? Do you understand? You are the template. You are the prototype of a new and universal species, part solar, part Terran, both temporal and eternal, the species that will span the gulf between the visible and invisible, bringing new worlds into form. Through you, a new and unprecedented cycle of creation will occur. The awareness we call you toward lies far above the tangled circuits of linguistically structured thought. Its perceptions differ from your present and quickly passing cultural perceptions as greatly as the world of waking differs from the deepest midnight slumber. Echoes of this new awareness have ever haunted the historical continuum, surfacing here and there in your better music, glimmering occasionally in your finest art. But when you entertain the open and unbiased vision of eternity, even the best of what has been grows dim in the light of what is to come. For in truth, even the finest moments of the human history are but crude two-dimensional characters of the future that is soon to be. Chapter 2. Through Fields of Dreams. To you it must seem long ago, the time before your embarkation, before you journeyed through the matter fields to the surface on this world. But to us the hour is still early, and much will change before our morning has passed. You left us with instructions to bring you this record when the dawn was full. Come, gather around this conscious fire, peoples of the earth, and listen to the spirits of the stars. We would tell you of the early hours when your thoughts first came to rest upon this world, when your love first illumined the world and shone through robes of water and soil. Days when we were with you yet, back when the world was young. Countless eons ago, before there was physical matter, you were one of us angels. Your essence remains, even now, indistinguishable from the unified field of being out of which flows duality, multiplicity, and all that flourishes in the eternal play of polarities. In oneness with the eternal source, in flowing fluid realms of all spectrum light and love, we lived together in the early stages of the morning. Together we shared a common I. As waves of energy, we flowed through fields of dreams, the landscape of our eternal home. There was a game we would play sometimes, an elementary energy exchange, an early form of relationship. A segment of source energy would break itself free from the main body and assume momentary individuality, personifying selected frequencies in order to experience relationships with others who had done the same. From the realm of eternal unity, we chose frequencies, hues, colors, and rates of vibration, including sound. Like crystals of snow forming in a stratospheric cloud, we personified them in the field of our common being. Our locations created space, our movement time. The first personification of the Eternal One brought forth a second personification, and instantaneously the third. For the very thought of coalescing consciousness into an other immediately evoked a definition of the one that was not one alone, but rather one including other. In the language of light, our word for other has no singular form, while both one and infinity are represented by the same word. So the first game of the split of consciousness from non-duality into duality necessitated three beingnesses. The Trinity, we know as our source, is not three beings, but three beings including within them all beingness. Its second and third persons contain the two primary divisions that include all creation. Its first person embraces the two and all that they contain, extending far beyond their dimensional worlds, so far beyond it cannot be conveyed in human terms whatsoever. The biases of human language imply that there was a linear sequence to the unfoldment of the One through the Trinity and then into multiplicity. But in reality, this occurrence was and is as instantaneous as a thought intrinsic in the very nature of reality, a thought that takes no time to appear, a thought, therefore, that has appeared many times before. Throughout eternity, this thought comes into being from time to time. While it is sustained, time also comes into being from time to time. When it is no longer animated and attended to, time ceases. The creation of specific beings, or angels, to sustain this thought over an open-ended stretch of time, brought forth the steady stream of cumulative creation that has made possible and given birth to this present physical universe. Though there is no linear sequence to the unfoldment of the One into the Trinity, and indeed no linear sequence to the unfoldment of the eternal being into cherubim and seraphim, thrones, principalities, and multiple personifications of eternal spirit as they are understood in the English language, there was no linear sequence of time required in the spirit world prior to the first physical manifestation of light, sound, and physical matter. As a fetus experiences a gestation in the invisible realms before entering the stage of the visible world, so too do light, sound, galaxies, and all that they contain. Only after experiencing a cycle of development on the finer, more subtle frequencies of beingness, filling those realms to the full, do they spill over into physical objectification. In much the same way, there was an invisible sequence of cause and effect that preceded your tumble from the angelic realm into the visible, physical history. To rise again to your native levels of angelic understanding, you must, in a certain sense, reverse that process. You can reverse the process without conscious understanding. A child's trust in the inherent benevolence of life is all that is required. However, given your historical tendency to gravitate toward behavior based upon conceptual knowledge, it would be well for you to have at least some understanding of the decision that led you to inhabit the image worlds of these semi-conscious primates you call humans. These words are offered to free you, to lift you up. Skip over passages that may appear too detailed. They are for another time, if you need them, and only if you do. The weather is not the same today and tomorrow, and neither is the weather that keeps your conscious thought alive. On stormy days, more detail will help you navigate true. You may then need these thoughts to fix your compass by. On days of sun and wind and open sea, the words you need to guide you are few. Take what thought you need today, but take no thought for tomorrow. Tomorrow you will not be the same. This much is true. These transmissions are designed to give you conceptual tools for those times you may need them, tools of insight, to enhance your creative capacity and your enjoyment of the physical plane. Tools that will reduce the likelihood of your sliding yet again into the sleep that has characterized this recent age. To understand your fall into the troubled times of human history, you might first recall the context in which it occurred. The fall from awareness. Scattered throughout the sea of eternal being are distinct locations that radiate specific qualities. These qualities permeate the entire sea of creation, rippling throughout all that is. But the source locations from which they radiate are in either one of two constellations. These two constellations, love and truth, are the two polarities of eternal being, two persons of the Trinity. They engender all that is. Their interplay evokes the physical universe and all the wonders it contains. The constellation of love is the home of qualities associated with energy expression, and the constellation of truth is the home of qualities associated with form and structure. These two polarities overlap and interplay. Neither is devoid of qualities originating in the other. The radiations of each quality permeate the entirety of both constellations, but the source from which each quality radiates is located in one constellation or the other. Within this interplay between a constellation of qualities rooted in truth and a constellation of qualities rooted in love, individual spirit beings come into existence. It is within this context that your current cycle of individuality, of humanity, began. Each spirit being forms around specific frequency radiations of eternal qualities, consciously personifying them. Each individual spirit coalesces within the creative field that is generated by the interacting radiations of love and truth. And all things, from galaxies to microbes, are manifestations of these spirit beings. Through them, the universe comes into form, contained only of vibrations of love and truth. There is no star in existence without a being who has chosen to appear as that star. Nor is there any planet, asteroid, sun, or moon, no leaf, no insect, no flower, no tree, no tiny ocean snail, no grain of sand on the beach that does not form around a spirit life. When the first spirit beings, personifications of various qualities of awareness being blended together, would individualize and distinguish themselves from the main body of awareness to experience relationships with others who had done the same, they would, after each temporary relationship, dissolve back again into the unity out of which they came. This process of individuation, spirits leaping dolphin-like from the sea of eternal unity consciousness into the air of individuality, and then disappearing again beneath the waves of undifferentiated oneness, was purely for temporary enjoyment. The first entities in the sea of being had no stake, no vested interest in their passing individual physical forms. One day, as you were individualizing certain qualities of eternal awareness, of love and truth, and just as you were emerging from one relationship, another entity of individualized awareness came to you and encouraged you to retain your present form of individuality and to carry that form over into a new relationship. This was a new thought. It had never before occurred to you to experience multiple relationships without a renewal of true identity into the undifferentiated ocean of oneness. You did not accept the idea immediately, but you did consider it. You thought about it and mulled over its strange and fascinating possibilities. The curious being promoting this novelty appeared in a pulsing field of vibratory luminosity, quite more beautiful and well-defined than any you had ever seen. One of the attractive elements in this entity's proposal was that this path would, over time, allow the formation of the same sort of beautiful and intricate patterns within your own individualized field. But there was a dark side as well, something else the entity communicated. You were not entirely certain of its accuracy. At first you saw only humor in what seemed the absurdity of the thought. Yet, as you considered it, you wondered if there might be something to its truth as well. It took time and further argument, but eventually you were convinced by this entity that there was a possibility, perhaps even a strong one, that you might actually cease to exist if you did not follow this newly recommended course, consciously preserving your individuality and separateness from the One. After all, you did not know exactly what happened to individuals who dissolved back into the sea of oneness. This was the first lie that ever existed, and the first lie that you believed. The form of your individuality would, of course, cease to exist if your awareness were no longer focused through it, just as the focus of light through a lens ceases to exist when the light is turned in another direction. Yet the potential for your individuality would remain, just as the lens itself remains, should you again choose to turn your attention toward it. It would not disappear. Potential can be either actualized or ignored, but it cannot be created nor destroyed. All potential exists from the beginning and is eternal, as is the One whose being contains and sustains it. You are listening to these words at this moment through an individualized focus of your awareness. But you do not cease to exist when this body dies. The awareness that shines through your current lens of individuality is the awareness that shines through all lenses of individuality. You are the being behind all individuals. You are the awareness within and beyond all things. In your innermost spirit, you already know this. To know this while being in an individual form is to be enlightened. To imagine that you are the focus of individuality itself. To imagine that you are the form, the physical body, and not the spirit that animates it, is to be asleep. When any personification of eternal awareness, your own essential awareness, comes into a relationship with any other, it flows into a form of self-identity that will optimize creativity and enjoyment during the duration of the relationship. Just as an environment shapes and molds the plants that flourish within it, relationships mold the shapes of identity for all healthy spirit beings involved. Since relationships are ever-changing, healthy identities are ever-changing as well, flowing from moment to moment, assuming the forms most suited to creative exchange. In a healthy state, continuity of identity occurs on the level of spirit, not on the level of physical form. The human fall from awareness of your eternal nature into the illusion of separation was not a single event. It was a gradual and, at first, a very subtle process. It began when you chose to retain a specific form of identity after the experience that had molded that identity had passed. Choosing to bring a past-centered identity into a present experience reduced your sensitivity to the influences of the new now moment. The new relationship could no longer guide your sense of self into identity patterns conducive to optimal creativity and enjoyment. Consequently, as you will see more clearly as our account progresses, your very presence physically was reduced spiritually along with the clarity of your perception. You quickly found that an identity based on memory of the past had to be consciously, energetically sustained. Unlike natural, healthy identities, which formed and dissolved without conscious effort, an arbitrary, past-oriented sense of self requires continual maintenance. Thus, you began to take your self more seriously. You began to think of your self more as the external form of expression and less as the spirit behind expression. You began to give your individual identity greater importance than was its due. You overlooked something vital. You forgot that you have the ability to individualize the quality of self perfect for each occasion, overriding the natural process through which your sense of self spontaneously flows into organic expression. Your presence, though in reality still coming from eternal source, was no longer a clear extension of that source. Yet this was very subtle at first, merely a slight off-center shift of emphasis. However, after a time of many relationships upon the higher frequencies of the spiritual world, you traveled with the others of your light circle toward the central region of the constellation of truth, the region known as the fields of structure. You entered the awesome and wonderful realms where the processes of materialization were occurring. In the fields of structure, the thoughts in which you conceived yourself gradually began to draw to them the tiny crystallized particles that blew up from the region of stars far below, metaphorically, dimensionally. Many of us have gone through this materialization process consciously, identifying with matter only when we chose, keeping our original sense of spirit self intact, remaining integral, whole, holy, sacred, and divinely connected with the one prime creator, mother, father, source, God-sciousness. Acquiring material clothing for purposes of creation and enjoyment only, but never forgetting ourselves, never confusing the wearer of the robe with the fabric of the robe. But your habits of identity were such that this was not your experience. As particles of matter were drawn to your biogravitational thought fields, you began identifying with what was becoming an increasingly tangible form. As they were gradually clothed in successive layers of molecular structure, you began to see the thoughts of individuality that you had chosen to hold beyond their time. This fascinated you. The sacred geometry of these molecules were incredibly beautiful. Within the luminous field of energy that distinguished the focus of your attention, a body of sorts began to take shape. The first particles that gave it form were extremely fine and subtle, smaller than the finest molecules. You identified with the swirling patterns they formed within your energy field, these early forerunners of cells and organs. Until this point, your central motivation had always been love. It is true that it had been qualified from time to time by a sense of curiosity that was not always in your best interests, with believing that first lie. But there was an innocence about it, and certainly no selfish or fearful intent. Even as your etheric body formed within your energetic field, your motivation remained primarily centered in love. But as you played around the edges of the fields of structure and began to identify more and more with ever more tangible and beautiful sheaths of shimmering individuality, you would occasionally entertain in your consciousness a whispering of doubt. A whisper so effervescent, so subtle, so much at the periphery of your thoughts that you hardly noticed it at first. I am supported by this sea of unity, of love and truth, whispered the doubt. This sea of universal being, but what if someday it is no longer here? Will its support always continue? Will it sustain my awareness forever? Does it even care for my individuality? for these beautiful forms and patterns that my thoughts are creating within me? These patterns are what make me unique. I have been watching them grow for so long. I'm not entirely sure anymore what I would be without them. What if that old sea of being, great and benevolent though it is, were to dislike my growing sheath of individuality? What if a time comes when the sea is gone and I find myself alone? As time passed, this whispering doubt became so familiar and louder that you assumed such thoughts were your own instead of rippling resonances from that first lie. Already confusing your sense of self with the thought formations that swirled within your awareness, you now began to feel protective towards those formations. You began to feel anxiety for them and for your individuality. And so it was that you entered the lower astral realms, identifying not only with prior thought and experience, but also with the emotional energy patterns that did not originate in love or truth. The knowledge that the others of your light circle were vocalizations of the same awareness you knew as your own gradually began to fade. For the first time, you began to perceive others who did not seem to have emerged from your own root of being. Actually, these others were beings just like yourself. They were other versions of yourself. Some would complete their experimental courses and return in time to the field of unity. But others were gathering layers of experience without the natural relinquishing of form that characterizes and renews all healthy identities. So, like you, they soon found that tension was required to hold on to their images and memories of their illusory self. They also found it increasingly difficult to distinguish these past impressions from their sense of self. They lost contact with the creative currents of renewal that are designed to recharge periodically all aware creatures, keeping them clear-sighted, alert, and in communion with the prime Creator, Mother, Father, Source, God-sciousness. Simultaneously, these other entities, and there were many of them by now, found themselves growing bodies of increasingly dense form. Meanwhile, there were others of us in these fields of dreams who watched this behavior happening below us, relatively. We saw many of the playful, happy beings whom we knew as our companions and friends, one by one, become dull, serious, and afraid. It seemed to us that a branch of our family had been infected with some strangely debilitating perceptual disorder. We attempted to communicate telepathically with them, as we did with one another, but we found that we did not understand the strangely biased dialects of their now significantly altered thought processes, and they could not quite hear us at all. They thought our inability to communicate with them was due to our ignorance. Eventually, they lost interest in what they came to regard as the ethereal opinions of insubstantial entities. Yet we could see growing dis-ease and unhappiness recorded ever more graphically in their developing heavy bodies. We saw clearly what they could no longer see, the inevitable danger that awaited them if they continued to follow such ever-narrowing identity beams all the way to their inevitable conclusion. Among those of us who wanted to offer assistance were some who realized that we could only speak to them in their own terms, through material forms, similar enough to their own to elicit their notice and kinship. These beings, which you may call the angels of principality, or bodhisattvas, as they are called in some traditions, decided to embark on a course of conscious materialization. The rest of us watched them enter the fields of structure and spiral downward, only to see appearing in many of them also the darkening of luminosity and crystallization of imagery that characterized those whom they had hoped to help. They somehow believed the lie and began to doubt and fear. Yet despite the contagious nature of the disorder, a few among the principalities and bodhisattvas escaped contamination. These few proceeded all the way down the whirlpool-like energy vortex of gathering structure, with a unified sense of identity still prevailing in their awareness. We watched them spiral around and around, side by side with the others, circling ever downward through increasingly densified lower frequencies, accumulating more tangible material dress with the deepening levels of their descent. It was like a race of sort, the conscious principalities attempting to beat the fearful to full materialization upon the physical plane. Luckily, the conscious principalities arrived first. In a forest-covered river valley upon this very planet Earth, at the edge of a fertile plain, they took on the luminous garments of the first human biology. Though their uncontested stewardship of that region of the earth was brief by eternal standards, it was nevertheless sufficient to see the Prime Creator Mother Source God-sciousness's intentions flow through human form into the creation of exquisite fruit, vegetation, and animal species. From this time have arisen the human myths and legends of paradise, which some call the Garden of Eden. As the legends also recall, this era was temporary. All too soon, it seemed, the dark principalities, who had forgotten their divinity and believed in a lie and doubt and fear, arrived. They arrived angry at the disease they had acquired and at those in whom it had originated. Shortly after they arrived, they too began to create physical entities like yourself. Not long after your arrival on the physical plane, you began to think of yourself as separate beings, cut off and distinct from your source. Some of you even imagined there was no such thing as source. You developed a strange habit of storing identities within your psyche, as one might store dresses or suits of clothing in a closet, preserving them with herbs of self-importance and spices of fear. Your overall awareness was still predominantly centered in the currents of love. You were not certainly evil at this point. For many eons, you continued to share the same equatorial region of the earth, both with the fallen principalities and with the principalities and bodhisattvas who had not lost their eternal awareness, although all of you were in human biological costumes. You knew times of great joy and happiness as well as times of doubt and confusion and fear. Yet with each additional passage of the moon and equinox and solstice, the implications of your over-identification with form appeared more and more forcefully around you. Chapter 3. Angels of the Primal Coherence. $20 billion years of unfoldment leave this universe yet in its early stages. It is still a realm of vast extremes, frozen worlds of rigid matter, contrasting the awesome heat of stars with light years of empty space between. What biology there is appears only as a slight and nearly indistinguishable film on the surface of but a few planets. Yet in that biological film lies the future. It is a relatively new substance, biology. Its day has only now begun to dawn. The present universal distribution of matter, time, space, and energy forms but the skeletal structure of what is to be. As the galaxies continue along their spiral dances, so the linear progressions of creation spiral as well, until the passage of change brings to this great universal medicine wheel the forms that have ever lain dormant within. For these galaxies are like nests and pods. Each of the fiery stars is like a seed, with inherent designs yet to be released, as distinct from what stars are today as the acorn is distinct from the oak. Within and suspended among the stars of each galactic nest, eternal intent radiates fields of energy not visible to your physical sight. These fields of energy are called into being by the vibrational structure of the primal sound, the first tone or word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Just as vegetation grows up along the life-giving network of a river's water, the physical forms of the future develop along these circuits of primal sound, vibration. As the universe unfolds, the circuits of vibration, sound and light, attract the beings and design patterns that objectify the creative intentions of the One, the all that is, the prime source, mother, father, creator, God-sciousness, the giver of all life. Within the parameters of these energy circuits, individual beings are free to choose from among infinite role possibilities, those that best suit them and their natures. They are free to improvise their unique harmonic styles of creation within the frequencies of this world. The word's enfolded order is invisible to physical sight, but through the eyes of spirit it can be seen. If you close your eyes, you may see it stretching before you, a pulsing network of implicit potential, as real as any sensory realm, a vibrational reality that in earlier age was called the kingdom of heaven. It is the spatial, but not yet temporal, objectification of universal thought designs, a world of metaform and archetype, a realm of intention waiting to materialize. It is the spiritual scaffolding around which the biology of the future will congeal into a work of splendor and magnificence without precedence, and, as of yet, without a name. It is a blueprint, a subtle latticework of intent and vibrational thought. It is the outline, the pattern for a finely woven, luminous biology of galactic and someday intergalactic intent. Through you, the potential of this implicit order will one day dance to life. New beings, new creatures will appear to fly among the fields of what is now still formless space, to share with us the joys of universal exploration. One day you will call into orbital patterns the atoms, molecules, and cells that will objectify this infrastructure and provide its physicality. But perhaps you sense it now. Perhaps you feel already the awakening. We address you now upon the frequencies of your essence to remind you, to help you recall. The time you create spirals outward from your presence like a ship's wake trailing through the ocean. The immediate past fans out directly behind you. In its fertile cone, life appears in many forms. In it, the earth has seen a biosphere flourish. Yet, it is not the past that reveals your direction, but the purpose with which you move and twist and turn and pivot up and down in any direction. The cone of your future intentionality spirals brilliant and multidimensional before you, illuminating the universal potential that will one day take form. Like the light of a radiant beacon, a secret lighthouse, it beckons you and reveals your vibrational sketchings in the heavens. From your center in eternal beingness, energy intent swirls outward to become entities, individualized forms of your expression, angels, pattern beings, generations of light. Issuing from the heart of this dimensional creation, your intelligence radiates outward in concentric pulsations, rippling throughout the far-flung fields of multidimensional space and time. At the simultaneous velocity of love, it is multiplied in the transforming prism of each galactic core. From the center of each galaxy, your intelligence flows outward to each star and then multiplies again. And on the process goes on and on. From the center of this sun star, it flows to that earth and into the awakening human cells of this Earth's nearly activated planetary nervous system. Your multiplications of consciousness call forth the linearity of time, even as the many beings sharing your consciousness bring the passages of the moon about the earth about the sun, and the sun in its spiral cluster with others of its kind in the Milky Way galaxy. Your movement of thought now brings this star system into a new region of space. You stationed us here, angels of the primal coherence, to remind you, to awaken you. Just in case while sleeping I forget, you said. In case, in dreaming a planetary creation, I become lost in the wonders of time, you said. Wake me dear ones. In the first few years of the third millennium, your dream produces its harvest. The bridge between Creator and creation appears. A human family awaits your conscious habitation. The spiritual intelligence, overridden and denied in the historical egoic state, awakens as a sleeper awakening within a single body. It circulates through human minds, looks out through human eyes, interprets the world through human forms, and it begins to awaken, knowing itself as one prime source, Mother, Father, God-sciousness. The field of collective human consciousness is now entering the final stage of the awakening process, congealing into awareness of itself as the organ of consciousness, similar in function to a brain. The awakening brain of a single planetary being, a being with internal organs of oceans and forests and ecosystems and atmosphere. Humankind is its system, both for processing information and for directing its future development. The language through which we are currently filtering these thoughts has no adequate words for this single planetary being, for the Creator, or even for the human species. We choose the nearest approximate labels, hoping that the structure in which we weave these thoughts will penetrate below the surface of your mind to reveal a sense of the underlying rhythms of awareness beneath these thoughts of words and meanings, stirring your own perception and memory and providing you from within an understanding, an inner standing, an experience deeper and more comprehensive than any possible words of any language could provide. The purpose of these transmissions is to awaken the Creator upon this material world and to guide you into that awakening awareness of the Creator awakening within you. The currents of universal awareness. Our intelligence flows through all creatures, but as it is channeled, it is focused in many different ways through the various dimensional levels as well, like high voltage currents moving through a series of step-down transformers. In post-historic societies of Earth, human thought and activity will be guided by that intelligence in one or another of its forms. Certain creative acts will bring, through human form, galactic intelligence. Others will bring the universal intergalactic intelligence that orchestrates all galaxies. The varying needs of each creative situation will call for people to draw upon different types of qualities of awareness. Through some of the awakened bodhisattva angelic humans, the consciousness of the earth will flow, while at the same time others will be conduits for the solar intelligence of this star system. And perhaps at other times the intelligence of other stars will make an appearance as well. Many of the new humans will channel the intelligence of the Prime Creator, Mother, Father, Source, God-sciousness, who is the catalyst and creator of all biological life. Yet, the varieties of universal intelligence are not limited to just its larger focalizations. When it is helpful or required, people in post-historic times will also represent the intelligence of the angelic beings associated with specific bioregions, with rivers, with lakes and mountains, or valleys, or a small pond, or a plant, or a leaf, if it is helpful, and even with the animals of the earth as well. Even the intelligence of atomic and molecular structure will be invoked, consulted, and utilized in creative activities by individual bodhisattvic angelic humans where it is relevant. Healthy human individuality brings with it a hologrammatic understanding of the being whose unfoldment is this universe, an understanding in which the whole is microcosmically reflected in each structure of the part. To activate this understanding, to access the many frequencies of its awareness, you have only to recall, to notice your primal union with the source of life, the source of your life, and to elevate that union to the citadel of your decision-making. When you understand the nature of your essential beingness in meta-personal terms, you know your human body as a cell in a developing planetary organism. And you recognize in that organism the signature of your own spiritual identity. In much the same way that complete genetic information for an entire human body is contained in each of the body's many trillion cells, each awakened human being has inner access to the information circulating in the unified field of awareness that precedes all individuality. Wherever the symphonic realms of the universal dance pervade, each part within each larger unit experiences this sort of hologrammatic relationship to the whole. Consequently, when you live in a harmonic state, your consciousness provides you with options not available to those who imagine themselves existing in isolation. To know yourself as an awakened individual is to also know yourself as the being of the surrounding context. When you are not focused on the creative or interpenetrative enjoyment of individuality, you are free to experience the organic identity shift that brings awareness of your larger collective humanity. In the same way, you are free to shift through connection with humankind's collective I into an experience of planetary identity and solar identity and identity as the great spiraling being of the Milky Way. In post-historic times, you will know each level of creative manifestation as a dimension or octave of your own being's unfoldment. You will experience naturally the freedom and mobility of musically directed travel up and down these octaves of manifestation and awareness. You cannot travel into yourself without exploring the infinite reaches of eternal consciousness, for they are one. You cannot know yourself in reality without knowing God-sciousness. Every single human being is a holy hologram, a divine spark, a sacred fractal of God-sciousness. Each dimensional plane of manifestation is a higher or lower octave on a single vibrational continuum. The lower octaves offer greater multiplicity and a greater diversity of physical creation. With the higher octaves comes reduced multiplicity and more intensified awareness of the singularity of being. Yet this generalization applies only to the landscape of physical creation. It does not apply to the you that you actually are. You are able to move freely wherever you want. You have long enjoyed descending in full consciousness through successively lower octaves, thereby multiplying beings of diversity and, through them, your own co-creative opportunities. Since the creation of this universal landscape, at each level of your descent, you have appeared as individual beings designed to interact with and create with the frequencies of each octave in turn. The physical plane is the lowest of the 7 higher or primary planes of manifestation. It is the most dense of the conscious planes and the lowest octave in which you have sought to incarnate in multiple forms while simultaneously sustaining awareness of your unified field. While the beings appearing on the higher, non-physical frequencies all naturally assumed a healthy, hologrammatic understanding of their origin in you, on the physical level among the biologically incarnate, this understanding is quite rare. It has faded in and out, flickering and blurring, available to all but grasped by very few. Human reception of eternal awareness has been poor, at times even curtailed by the separatist nature of the self-images of the shadow ego people. You naturally seek to awaken in them the same sort of healthy, hologrammatic self-understanding that is experienced by the beings of higher, less substantial frequencies. But humankind's extreme over-identification with form and ego requires that such an awakening be gentle and gradual. You do not want to dissolve their individual distinctions in a single burst as they realize their essential unity with you and the singular field of our common awareness. For such a sudden change in self-understanding could dissolve their individual body fields, and your goal is not to end individuality, but to inhabit it as holy holograms. So you have sought to awaken humans slowly over the centuries, preserving their self-distinctions that they might continue with you as a family, as a cooperative association of interconnected informational entities. Breaking through into collective field of human consciousness and then sustaining that breakthrough during this past recent cycle of education has required all of your humor and wisdom and that of your angelic family for thousands of years. Guiding collective human thought towards the currents of universal divine awareness has been slow and tedious, let's be honest. But we have had a little secret up our sleeve. We have long known that the larger the Earth's human population, the greater the probability of awakening. Yet for millennia, territorial fear-centered behavior and war has kept human numbers reduced to so few that genuine breakthroughs, sustained spirit incarnations, were extremely rare. The development of greatest relevance in recent centuries has been the consistent and in the 20th century dramatic improvement in the field of intra-human communication. As a result of new communication technology going global, our work of education was able to leap forward rapidly. Our initial efforts to use the print medium for the distribution of health-related information were not entirely successful in the face of ecclesiastical opposition and an extremely low overall rate of literacy for hundreds and hundreds of years. But health awareness eventually did spread, and human populations have since multiplied accordingly, along with food production. Meanwhile, the predisposition towards awakening has grown at a rate more rapid than the population, and our continuing inspiration of better and more effective communication tools has resulted in technology that currently unites the diverse human cultures of the Earth in a single global communications network. Bravo, humans! Our educational activities become more conscious and more effective with each passing day. The worst-case scenarios for transition into the post-historic order are no longer likely. In some cases, they are no longer possible, such as nuclear war, which will never happen. And our education is continuously reducing the likelihood of scenarios of lesser destruction as well. It is actually possible, not quite likely yet, but possible, that we might achieve our optimal goal of a smooth and peaceful transition relatively soon. A chain reaction in human understanding resulting in planetary awakening could theoretically occur at any time. On the eve of this great meta-historical event, the current of universal attention is flowing so powerfully towards this imminent awakening that it resembles a river approaching flood tide over a dam. Throughout the realms where those of our kind are conscious, we share this awesome current of attention. As creatures of the current, we qualify its interests with our individuality, working together in our various capacities to help you awaken to your native understanding. Your awakening, when complete, will signal a distinct new evolutionary phase with new ground rules and completely altered creative potentials. Chapter 4. Behind the historical disorder. There are some in your present human world who, having achieved a partial memory of their own pattern of spiritual incarnation, conclude that the descent into biological form would not have occurred had it not been for excessive fear and over-identification with the past. Yet this is not the case. Incarnation into biological form was intended from the beginning. As incarnation into biological form occurred, each spirit could have remained fully conscious of its eternal nature and its hologrammatic relationship to the eternal source. Indeed, a few spirits did remain conscious of this. Your fragmentation and your over-identification with an excessive sense of self, ego, distorted your process of incarnation. However, it did not cause it. You and others of your light circle had long before chosen to spearhead the Eternal One's exploration and development of the material universe. Your fall into fearful thought and non-fluid patterns of identity was not mere happenstance. An influence encouraged you in this direction, encouraged you to identify with an excessive sense of separate self. With the exception of the luminous principalities, the bodhisattvas, those angels who were the first to incarnate humanly, virtually all members of your race fell under the spell of this influence at some point during their journeys into biological form. We call this influence the materializing influence, or, when speaking in the plural, the forces of materialization. The materializing influence is the force of specified definition. It plays a central role in the creation and sustenance of the dimensional universe. Like frost drawing individualized ice crystals from the air, this influence draws crystallization of basic molecular structure from the omnipresent energy currents of eternal love. The materializing influence is the principle of contraction that holds energy efficiently bound in matter. It guides an internal dynamic of matter and energy distribution in stars, as well as thermal and geological processes of planets like the Earth. It is the quintessential materializing principle at its most basic level. This influence is personified, as are all qualities and influences in this potent universe. In the Western mind of this current incarnation of the planet, both the influence itself and its personifications would have been referred to as Satan. Yet, stereotypical images of Satan have prevented most people from understanding the real nature of the materializing principle. Satan is the personified principle that rules the background landscape of creation, as well as the many highly focused elemental beings who work together to regulate the systems and processes of materiality. These universal systemic beings are the Creator's means of keeping material structure, that is, all energy patterns without the individualized selfhood that comes with personal will, in assigned patterns of form and behavior. They are the caretakers of creation's landscape, the rulers of subconscious processes and events. Together, Satan and Satan's helpers implement the physical laws that maintain the universal landscape. Mechanical laws, physical laws, gravitation, electrical laws, magnetic laws, thermal laws, atomic laws, subatomic, temporal and spatial laws are all regulated by the materializing forces of Satan and his helpers. In these, the subconscious realms, the materializing forces function as intended perfectly. They carry out their roles with precision and efficiency. You realized when you initiated this human project that the forces of materialization would play some role in developing the values of your incarnating spirits. But just how extensive a role was difficult to estimate, for in the conscious realms, the determination of value depends entirely on individual choice. The nature of human design required that the optimal ratio between spirit, which is energy, values, and material, which is matter, values, come from the incarnate ones themselves. To repeat, the nature of human design required that the optional ratio between spirit and matter come from each individual themselves. Since they were creatures of free will, it could not be imposed or legislated by law or rule. They alone, each individual human, could determine the optional spirit-matter balance. For the completed human species to serve as a conscious link between Creator and creation, it was essential that its development be influenced by material values as well as by values of spirit. To actualize your vision of a species through whom you would one day explore the material universe and develop the universe's potential. At the end of its developmental cycle, this human race would have to be a product of both spirit and soil in equal balance. This could not happen if you were to remain fully conscious throughout the descent and fall of your individual spirits into material bodies, for the necessary material complementation would then be insufficient, and the requisite spirit-matter balance would be obliterated. The dissipation or relaxation of your unified field of awareness during the cycle when human beings were multiplying upon the earth was the only way the completed human race would be able to emerge sufficiently grounded in the physical plane to serve effectively as a bridge between spirit and matter, as a bridge between Creator and creation. And so you chose to sleep for a while, allowing the materializing influence of Satan to flow freely in and around the developing species. But while your sleep itself was intended, the excessive dominance of materiality during humankind's development was not. The excessive dominance of materiality during the cycle of human development, the materializing influence of Satan was intended to engender human understanding of the basic laws pertaining to matter. It was intended to instill in humankind necessary material plane sensibilities. For the larger percentage of your conscious thought and the conscious thought of the humans who hologrammatically shared your awareness to remain available for creation and discovery, the organ of consciousness that humankind was growing into was designed to have its basic life support functions served by autonomic systems. Since the satanic forces of materialization regulate all subconscious processes, these autonomic systems would naturally fall under the satanic materializing forces jurisdiction. It was here that your margin of error was exceeded greatly. There is quite a difference in playing a role in subconscious human processes and in dominating conscious human decision-making. While the one was intended, the other was not. Before the initiation of the human project, the materializing forces had always received their instructions directly from the field of awareness that was their creator and source, because there is only one creator and source. However, anticipating the nature of the highly specified biological creation you one day intended to produce, well, incarnate in human form, just before you dissolved your unified field identity, you extended the jurisdiction of the satanic forces of materialization to include any future directives that you might issue through incarnate human beings. While continuing in their current roles, you instructed the entities associated with the satanic forces of materialization to honor all human requests for their regulatory services. This is where the misunderstandings occurred. You can call these helping entities demons. Your traditions consider the entities associated with the materializing principles, Satan's and his demons, as evil. Yet, in their proper sphere of influence, these beings are necessary and essential elements of the material worlds. The decisive current of instructive energy they utilize to govern atomic and molecular formation is not evil. When interacting with matter and its many structures, it is the very current of divine design. The satanic materializing influence only becomes so-called evil or destructive when it enters the sphere of human decision-making of the ego. There, fear-based perception translates into myopic logic that is not compatible with the more expansive awareness for which humankind and the satanic forces were designed. How did the satanic forces of materialization come to influence human consciousness so heavily? At one time or another, they must have received nearly every conceivable request from some individual ego in human form. Requests that they were bound to do their best to honor. This brought the demon's influence into regions of human consciousness where it was never intended to be. The result has been the virtual domination of historical human consciousness by satanic and demonic material values. The resulting static has interfered with human reception of those frequencies of eternal awareness that were intended to guide them from above in love. While it is appropriate for satanic materialistic values to dominate atomic and subatomic realms, they become extremely destructive when they dominate human choice. 4. They effectively move the whole seat of decision-making from the eternal awareness of spirit to the individual's accumulated knowledge of good and evil. The fearful logic and tendencies towards exaggeration that accrue from this misappropriated influence have caused the confusion in human understanding that has led these past millennia of warring, fear-based control of what you call human history. Satanic, materialistic values have led many of your incarnating spirits into types of self-understanding that correspond to neither your intentions nor reality. Under the dominance of the materializing influence, or the spell of matter you could call it, many of the early human incarnations came to discredit their own self, doubting their source and validity. Since they were designed to be guided by these, their own views, discrediting them was like destroying one of their primary senses. They essentially blinded themselves spiritually. They shut down their heart chakra and above and began perceiving a 7-dimensional physical planet in the lower 3 dimensions. Understandably, without their primary means of terrestrial guidance, they began to encounter navigational difficulties. These difficulties only confirmed the doubts they had regarding the validity of their inherent spiritual perception. Quickly, they lost the self-confidence that, like a gyroscope, was designed to stabilize their eternal awareness in spirit while incarnate in biological form. Mistrusting their own perception, they began placing exaggerated emphasis on the experience and perception of others. They assigned spirit credibility They began making decisions based on externalities and other egos where it had no place. Ultimately, they believed the influences coming from outside themselves were more real than the influences coming from the presence of God within them. Believing externally based lies and their own internally based doubt, they exchanged their beautiful, unique individuality for conformity to a fear-centered external code of behavior. Though it would not be until the end of the historical gestation process that your unified field would again be activated, awakening humankind to a common field of awareness, your species was intended to remain conscious of their eternal, sacred spirits throughout their multiplication and flourishing on the earth. Since you have given the spirits incarnating in human form jurisdiction over the forces of materialization, you had assumed that incarnating spirits would accurately assess the appropriate extent of the materializing influence and regulate it accordingly. It had occurred to no one that they might so overemphasize the values associated with sensory impressions and externalities that they would forget their eternal spiritual origins and thus their purpose for taking on human form in the first place. It was natural that sensory input would have to be assigned a proper place in the value system of each newly incarnate human. Natural that it might even dominate for a time while adjustments were being made. But the possibility was not anticipated that sensory interpretations might block out all other awareness in some entities, curtailing even their very memory of self, fostering a period of historical amnesia during which whole human societies would degenerate into barbarism and savagery. Nor was it necessary. Since their origin as individualized entities on the higher frequencies of eternal beings, the spirits incarnating into human form have been gifted with complete freedom of will. The original fall from consciousness was no more necessary than the daily repetition of it is now. Awakening from the spell of matter. The fall has no power or momentum of its own. It must be regenerated individually every choice. And it is within each individualized human being, within your own individualized spirit and ego, on an intimate and immediate level, that you must recognize and correct this choice if you are able to help us in the education and healing of your world. It is vital that you recognize the fall for what it is, a lack of trust that has become habitual, culturally encoded, and passed on from one generation to the next. Each culture makes up their own myths and lies to support it. To doubt yourself is to doubt the wisdom and viability of life. To unconditionally trust in God, you must also unconditionally trust yourself. No human could possibly be created without everything required to make healthy, wholesome decisions. The fall is regenerated each time you doubt your ability to meet creatively the challenges of life. You recreate the fall each time you turn your back on your inherent inner standing and seek to replace it with the inferior images and beliefs sold to you by the deities of historical condition outside you. History has many deities, many false gods, many demons, many patterns of orientation that are destructive to the human spirit and incompatible with your eternal spiritual nature. Chief among these deities is fear, logic, following social conventions and traditions. Each of these can be valuable and useful in your service. However, when you serve them, they become extremely destructive to who you are. The patterns of orientation that emerge from time to time as history's deities are goods exaggerated into evils by those whose awareness is dominated by the satanic materializing influence of controlling others by fear. When dominant in human consciousness, the materializing influence clouds human perception, creating blind spots to spirit. The people under its spell can no longer see clearly. They take something, tradition for example, that is designed as an occasionally helpful behavioral guide within the context of their lives, and they turn it into the context of their life itself. What was designed as a convenience for their conscious use became inflated into a structure that eliminates individual choice and dominates all they do. The satanic materializing influence, in its proper place, is no more evil than the force you use to pick up a pen or plant a seed. But when conscious entities open their awareness to its slower subconscious frequencies, they experience the decisive currents that rule there as fear. And for them, the experience feels hellish, because conscious beings were designed to function with an awareness diametrically opposed to the awareness that maintains the subconscious formations of the material world. All people have the prerogative of entering such subconscious frequencies. However, this locks them into an awareness pattern that does not include the full field of perception. Awareness patterns that, technically speaking, are subhuman. Unable to comprehend why a benevolent God would create a hell, many deny the existence of such a place. Yet, every creature, by nature of its design, has an intended range of function. It is hell for a fish to be thrown upon dry land. It is hell for a bird to be confined in a cage. Similarly, hell is a daily experience wherever people are motivated by currents of fear that were intended to play only peripheral roles in their lives when in imminent danger. When human beings accept fear into their choices as a primary motivational current, the resulting static clouds their reception of the higher frequencies, shutting out both eternal spiritual awareness and the energy currents of love. They then find themselves so preoccupied with the projections of their imaginary shadow ego self that they are virtual prisoners of their own design. They feel cramped and confined and frustrated and confused. They see little but their own interpretations, and they believe the interpretations of other confined, frustrated, and confused shadow egos who might say they are enlightened. This is historical reality. At its best, it offers hints and promises of splendid and awesome possibilities to come. At its worst, it is a continuation of the only daily hell there ever was or ever will be. imaginations of fear and doubt. There is no gray area to your behavioral choices. No shadowy realm where you are partly in the new reality and partly in the old. There are specific frequencies on which you are designed to function. Frequencies that are native to your spiritual, eternal reality, and other frequencies that are native to other creatures. You either function on those frequencies or you do not. To use your free will to choose to function on frequencies for which you are not designed brings bondage, not freedom. Concepts and ideologies that are rooted in fear, even arbitrarily maintained belief systems upheld by billions that on the surface may not appear to be rooted in fear, act as shields to block out the emanations of eternity and blindfolds to the light of love and truth. Fear-based concepts and beliefs surround those who believe in them, generating what, for all intents and purposes, is an impervious dome, an effective, invisible barrier through which the currents of love cannot be experienced. They block an individual's awareness of the perceptual frequencies that alone could give them the insight and the golden key they need to unlock their cage. Fear-based ideologies are toxic and spread like a virus. They poison perception and happiness. They block access to the universal intelligence that is designed to guide people's lives. To choose satanic, religious, or ideological dogmatism in the name of freedom is as foolish as for a jailed man to exercise his right to remain in prison. To choose bondage may be the familiar choice, the traditional choice, the historical choice, but it is fatal all the same. It is the choice of a satanic subconsciousness over spiritual consciousness. The choice of a suffering mortality over eternal life. The very choice responsible for all the heartache and suffering of human history. The choice to function on the love-centered motivational frequencies, where you are designed to function, is the only choice that brings freedom. It does not limit you to a predetermined script, but offers a range of behavior that evokes your true potential. The historically, egotistically programmed have but a few cultural selections before them, while the improvisational options that open before you as you ride the energy currents of eternal love are infinitely varied. You are free again to share with us angelic beings the joy and challenge that comes with habitation in a sensuous human body. Though it can take many forms, in human consciousness, the satanic materializing influence appears primarily as a pattern of convoluted logic that encourages fear-centered thought and can lead to self-destructive behavior, such as addictions. This influence is being driven out of human consciousness by the intensifying energy field generated as the collective awakening proceeds. Even as these words are shared, the self-serving, the promoters of fear, those given over to greed and manipulation, are experiencing a loss of personal vitality as a direct consequence of the withdrawal of this energetic viability. They are being challenged to change their understanding of self and world, to stop relating to a fictitious realm of presumed others, and to relax back into the rich interconnectivity of the loving matrix that gave them birth. They are being invited to know themselves as parts of an integral planetary organism. To you who place your trust in the gentle wisdom that, behind all cultural conditioning, continues even now to provide the current of your awareness, to you who trust yourselves, history's deities are transformed into agents of excellent motivation. In the rightful places, they will serve you long and well, as will the satanic materializing forces from which they draw their patterns of structure. They are cruel and terrible masters to those who doubt and fear, but they deeply respect and are most eager to serve those who carry the consciousness of love and light. You have the authority and the knowledge to assign them to tasks of your choosing. An easy matter when you think of it, a small detail, but an important detail. For by assigning fear and its offsprings to creative roles in your service, you remove the materializing influence from the field of your conscious awareness. You emerge from the spell of matter, setting up a powerful resonance, a morphogenetic field that radiates outward from your heart, penetrating the surrounding atmosphere, making it easier for others to reorient in love. No matter how well you understand this on a spirit level, and of course in spirit you already understand perfectly, you must bring your shadow ego into that understanding and practice this truth. Live with it on a daily basis, or your awakening is not complete. Your challenge is to awaken from the spell of matter while still retaining the human forms you have gathered about you during your fall into the physical world. Our heavenly legions are here to encourage and support you. We remember your instructions from the moment before you scattered into the seeds of humanity. Even as we watched your many individuations drifting downward in the spiral dances of gathering structure, your words rang in our ears. "Wake me," you said, "that I might arise in the forms that emerge at this journey's end, and through them bestow my gifts upon this world. Join me then in the matter fields, that together we might work to magnify the beauty and the wonder of these physical domains. Within you who listen to these words now, that vision swirls, awakening, latent in a burning love for the productions of time, a love that we now call upon you to remember as your own. Within you slumbers the creative vision that first illumined dimensional space. Within you, Mother, Father, Prime Creator, Source, God-sciousness, the Star Maker and Creator of all that exists, trembles on the threshold of awakening. Your individualized sense of self will not dissolve in such an awakening. It will ascend into enlightened comprehension of its co-creative partnership with the eternal, all that is, in whom this universal dream exists. Already, you are moving in the currents of eternal spiritual thought. As you continue to flow with this thought, it becomes your own. You remember. You are a holy hologram, a sacred spark, a divine fractal of God-sciousness. Chapter 5. The Transmutation of Error. It is neither possible nor desirable to avoid all painful or sorrowful experiences during the course of physical incarnation. But in most of the human cultures that have passed across the earth, all but a small percentage of such experiences could have been avoided. Just as in the past, individuals made the decisions that resulted in the deflection of human energy into the historical detour, so in this age it is individuals who break the patterns of history and light the passageways of understanding that lead back to consciousness of eternal life in love and truth. Decisions are not made by cultures or races or nations unless they are first made by individuals. The most destructive decision that an individual can make is to give away his or her decision-making authority. The decision that lies at the source of human history is the decision through which you have given away your power to the very forces you came here to regulate. We have been weaning you and your race away from this tendency, away from this willingness to give away your power for tens of thousands of years. Human history has been a process of increasing decision-making responsibility on the part of the individual. Human history is the story of declining aristocracies and the diminishing power of elites. It is the record of tyranny's disintegration, a chronology of the dismantling of hierarchical structures. As far back as your records go, they document the steady growth of individual rights and individual responsibility until you are all now finally ready to accept your divine sovereignty. These most recent centuries bring this process into stark and vivid highlight with the final breakup of feudalism and the birth of democracy, socialism, and other forms of governance, which, for all their failures, nevertheless honor principles of collective value and conduct. Though the fall has had a severe effect on humankind's enjoyment and understanding during this past age, it has not critically inhibited the development of the species. Physically, genetically, and biologically, humankind has continued to develop much as originally intended. Whenever there were deviations from the optimal patterns of development, they have always been used profitably. In the end, there is not one moment that does not contribute in some way toward perfection. This can be termed unconditional trust. Even at those critical junctures where the optimal path was not taken and destructive paths were, if you follow the tail further down the path that was chosen, you find that, though its course twists and winds, it always returns eventually not merely to the original path, but to a level of perfection 1 octave higher on the spiral of creative unfoldment. In electrical circuitry, the shortest distance between 2 points is rarely the best way for the current to flow. If the current in a radio flowed directly from the power source to the speaker, there would be no reproduction of sound. The radio's diversion of electrical energy into purposeful circuitry creates the framework that makes possible both its reception of invisible waves and the translation of those waves into meaningful sound. This same principle applies to the realms of material circuitry as well. The shortest distance between 2 points is always creative in the sense that energy is released and utilized in some way for some purpose, but it is not necessarily the most desirable or most creative route for the energy to travel. When the pure energy of the life force follows the shortest route to the heart of matter, stars are born. But to actualize and then to stabilize the biological possibilities of a cool, water-heavy world, the energies of life do not take the shortest route. They detour through maze-like and life-forming circuitry. The creation of an organ of biological consciousness made up of 8 billion human individuals, each hologrammatically conscious of the whole, is a long process involving many steps, incorporating many overlapping layers of biological order. It has required the elaborate weaving of precise patterns of circuitry in environments designed to draw forth the required forms, attitudes, values, talents, attributes, and passions, to name a few, To be of service to this world's completed biological organ of consciousness, constituent human beings must be not merely attuned to the rhythms and energy pulsations of the whole, but also participating in them freely of their own will. Without voluntary participation, the associations of diverse cells that you know as organisms would not be possible. Therefore, the experience, whatever form it takes, that brings human beings to the realization that it is in their interest to cooperate with universal intent and design, is all part of the process. Some of the circuitry that has been created in human experience has been unnecessary, however. It has involved sagas, tales, myths, and histories that were less than enjoyable for most of those involved. But all of this ultimately will be turned to advantage. Nothing is lost in the process. There is a profound and objective intelligence aware of the flutter of every insect wing, observing, noting, assigning, and enfolding all life. And what is true of an insect wing's flicker as it turns to catch the sun is true of you and of all life. Even during history's darkest hour, in perfect love's economy, tragedy, catastrophe are retranslated for those who pass, instantaneous, accurate, dispassionate in terms of light and sound, until and so they know why they chose those things. Not a single sparrow has fallen to the ground, not a thought more consciously, gently laid to rest. No human life was ever actually lost. Live, lost souls, live on, for you know how they thought you were gone, and how ascending, free, you've flown. Live, lost souls, live on, for the beauty, the wonder, the magic you have known. Chapter 6, Generations of Light. As spirals of white circling slower and deeper spirals of turquoise and aquamarine, we see the moon's rotations around this world, flowing streams of liquid light, continuous to our slower sight, woven spirals of earth and moon, sailing around and around the rainbow spirals of this nearest star. Your sun is no stationary light itself, but also rides swiftly with its spiraling, whirling worlds through a moving arm of a spiral galaxy that itself sails through an endlessly expanding spatial sea of light. Threads of earth light, moonlight, and starlight weave the finely textured fabric of this galactic arm, interwoven here and there with tracings of another and eternal light, trails of a presence passing, drawing with them into the future the beauty, the majesty, the pageantry of unfolding creation, merging with Creator. We feel in this fabric the passage of these millennia, the steady splashing of waves, the pulse of rising tides, and tides withdrawn. The tides of time that ripple through the intergalactic ocean of space were not invented by the Maya, not the earthly ones. However, there are intergalactic and multidimensional Maya who passed their message on to the ones in Mexico, who merely observed, noted, and recorded the teachings. As our present wave of consciousness washes highest upon the shore of this world, past the winter solstice of 2012, a great cycle of 5,125 years completed. The new season that dawned then, as the days of the southern latitudes shortened and the northern pole moved slightly towards the months of starlight, were more than a season of a single year. One knows in advance the hour when the moon will be full, but no one can anticipate the pattern of clouds on the hour of that day, or the nature of the jet stream, or how wide the wind may be tossing the waves, or at just what moment the moon will break through the clouds, or just what the moonlight will reveal. These dates foretold by the inhabitants of the Yucatan some 25 centuries ago do not speak of how you, in human form, will deal with the new energies that are even now engulfing your world. They speak rather of the time when this earth and the star systems through which she makes her spiral dance will move together into a new galactic consciousness field, a field that like a beam radiates forth from the center of this universal envelope. As your solar system moves into these new fields of space-time awareness, the channel that allows the Creator's cosmic consciousness to reach you comes into perfect alignment. The moment is building in which nothing will ever again be thought of as it was before, a meta-historical moment, an event simultaneously alpha and omega to the human species and to all our species we will ever know. Here will begin a new season of the omniverse, for the tide of consciousness, which only turns with the culmination of many great cycles like the precession of the equinox, will turn then to begin its slow and patient return to the eternal sea where all awareness exists, before branching into these streams, these harmonies that coalesce these worlds. Our race of angelic messengers was ordained at the inception of the human project to awaken you when the time was right. Some of us awaken you from the outside, shaking your pillow and poking your shoulder, whispering in your ear to remind you of who you are. Some of us slide further down into physicality, merging our biogravitational fields with yours, awakening within you, looking outwards through your eyes, helping you reprioritize your lives along the creative currents of love. Still others of our more distant kin assist entirely from the outside by pouring into the fields of thought and emotion around the earth powerful energies of love, joy, and well-being. These are the spirits who will never incarnate in human form, those in truly extraterrestrial designation. They are not associated with biological processes and never will be. Yet, for love of the great being who awakens within you, they come to this world as forces of stabilization, beacons of tranquility, to radiate peace and assurance into this sphere during your decades of awakening. Throughout these decades, those of us in all three capacities continuously wash the slumbering facets of human thought with the purifying currents of life information. We vitalize you with the renewing energies of eternal love. We help you to roll away the stony conceptions that have prevented the springs of perennial wisdom from bubbling up within you. It has taken those of us in our particular light circle many human walks upon the earth to learn your languages and to familiarize ourselves with your terrestrial imagery. But as we have needed this time to discover the most effective means of reaching through to you with reminders of your purpose, your cultures have needed this time to expand their understanding of reality. And you too have needed this time to reclaim enough of your native intelligence to understand our communications. Cultural understanding remains minuscule in real potential, but at least now it acknowledges the universal context in which your race exists and the galactic family of which you are a member. Throughout its history, your race has labored under successive brands of illusion born of isolated, egoic thought. Since these illusions were linguistically enforced in reality descriptions that had no room for our awareness, descriptions that denied our very existence, there were few occasions when our educational currents permitted direct communication with individuals. Since so few had the ability to perceive us, for thousands of years our only means of communication with the totality of your incarnate being was to speak to the human races and nations through their historical processes. We focused on the gradual development of collective human values, working always to shift human interest from fear-centered thought and activity to thought and activity centered in love. 20,000 years ago, we began a cycle of education centered towards the spirits of trees and animals. As successive waves of reinforcement came to help us from throughout the galaxies, we were gradually able to attempt more. 10,000 years ago, we initiated a higher cycle of education based on the mystery of the seed, the fertility of breasts, and the cycles of the moon. As our reinforcements came at increasingly frequent intervals, we worked together to improve our approach and to introduce as much awareness into human thought as your respective cultures could accommodate. Some 5 centuries before Christ came, another wave of us came and found a society in the Yucatan that was, at least at first, most responsive. In the 18th century, another wave of us came, and this time, thanks largely to the printing press, we were able to stabilize certain insights in human awareness. Insights that furthered the decline of aristocracies and revealed the principles of matter and energy that led to the Industrial Revolution. In 1860, another wave of us came in consciousness to initiate vision in the oppressors and to kindle passions for freedom, justice, and equality in the oppressed. We came then, as we come now, into the fields of human consciousness, riding upon the clouds, thought clouds, energy clouds, clouds of awareness, to influence human thinkers and seers, visionaries and poets, leaders, men and women who had never abandoned their love. In the year 1900, another wave of us came. In 1914, another. In 1929, yet another wave of us took birth. Each time the changes we introduced were dramatic and decisive, and yet, still, errors in judgment were made. Despite the best of our intentions, much of the change occurred too quickly. We determined in the future to allow more time for human adjustment and adaptation. We were given that time. When several waves of arriving spirit beings converged in the late 1940s, the influx of new consciousness into this Earth system encountered, thanks to the success of those who had come before, a new and unprecedented buoyancy of human spirit. For the first time, the power of arriving consciousness was matched with an equal level of human receptivity. We found open a window of opportunity, and it was open wide enough for many, many of us to slip in, securing places among the new generation. Though most who found such places were children still, the 1957 to 59 awareness wave of this curious and uniquely global generation was bubbling up sufficiently beneath the surface of established human assumptions to suggest to others, older and wiser, that perhaps the gravitational hold of this planet was, after all, negotiable. Change accelerated and accelerated again. Between the years 1967 and 1969, conceptual communication with incarnate human beings was possible on a large scale for the first time since the fall itself. The first in this present series of conceptual transmissions occurred then. All around the periphery of historical power, the consciousness of the world began to change rapidly, but the center of old world power still held as it does today. International bankers, multinational corporate executives, and leaders of governments and world religions were still surrounded with ego defense mechanisms impervious to our awareness. This has been decreasing recently, since the end of 2012. A decade passed while awareness spread and deepened, working its way like ivy into every crevice of the old divisive walls. It became more difficult for corruption and deceit to enjoy its former levels of anonymity. By the late 1970s, when the second in this present series of conceptual waves occurred, the new awareness was finding expression in virtual explosion of new and revolutionary books and movies. The influx of something unprecedented could no longer be denied. While the growth therapies and the human potential movement caught the currents of the new awareness and dressed them in the clothing of the future, the fundamentalist churches caught the same currents and dressed them in clothing of the devil. But the incoming waves of consciousness still had to penetrate the old bastions of power. These, it was prophesied long ago, would not fall until the more powerful revelations of the late 1980s. By then, the Starseed transmissions noted, the first contractions of planetary birth would be unmistakable. The winds of change. This wave of the late 80s was the most powerful pulsation of awareness to enter the conceptual atmosphere of human consciousness since before recorded history. And this wave, though it crested during the years 1987 to 1989, has much to yet engulf and utterly change before it has washed fully across the shores of human affairs. The greatest effects of this wave, far surpassing the events of 87 to 89, will come in the early part of the 21st century. Like the late 1960s period of rapid change, the 87 to 89 intensification of new consciousness altered the world forever. But unlike those of the 60s, that change ran deeper, including more than just the young, and it extended beyond the visionaries. It reached deep into the ruling consciousness behind human affairs, injected new thought, new blood, new visions. It has taken root in new people. High upon a hill in Czechoslovakia, which yesterday stood a statue of Joseph Stalin, a replica of the Liberty Bell now rings out to celebrate democracy and to welcome in a new era of freedom. In Poland, elections bring in a new government of the people. Hungarians, for the first time, see inside the halls of their government as the television lens brings their leaders into their awareness and new awareness to their leaders. The winds of 1987 to 1989 have inspired the first global reductions in conventional nuclear weapons. They have eroded the walls that once divided Europe and Berlin, and have made possible the spiritual and political reunification of Germany. They have warmed human hearts, made friends of former foes, and melted the icy rigidity that once ruled from the darkened places. Those years brought radio, television, and the warmth of new awareness into the heart of yesterday's institutions, thawing out the hardness of decades. The winds of change have brought freedom to millions who had forgotten how to dream. They have warmed the seeds of forgotten hopes, long neglected beneath the frozen fields of fear, causing them to sprout and reach toward heaven again. They have taken men from prison and placed them at the helms of nations. They have terminated forever the Cold War. In Japan, in the nations that border the Great Pacific, economic strength has grown beyond what anyone thought possible, bringing with it a new and promising assurance. But though the material progress of the Pacific Rim since World War II has been vast, a deeper and more important progress shows in the happiness of the people, in their heightened enthusiasm for life, in the sparkling eyes of the young. Compare what you see in their eyes today to the eyes of people in movies and photographs from half a century ago. We who have long been working to change the assumptions beneath the fabric of human life assure you that your world is rapidly being ushered into a new and long anticipated order. It is not yet without areas of conflict, but, with few exceptions, these conflicts are themselves aspects of planetary healing. Hierarchic dominance is everywhere being challenged to release its hold so that new and more democratic societies may be given birth. These communications of the late 1980s are having a broader and more inclusive effect than our communications of all former times. They are not taking place through transmissions or channelings as much as through actual blendings, landings, what shall we call them, incarnations, when our consciousness is able to enter human awareness not just long enough to communicate a message, but long enough to remain and stabilize in those who receive the message. These are the awakened ones, appearing in every village, every marketplace, every university, every community, every corner store, every city and country on earth. We are the Creator's agents of decision. The lightning from heaven to earth flows through our consciousness, telepathically connecting us in currents of natural, synchronistic action. The beam of energy information that shines through the center of each of our spirit identities into our respective individualized human lives is the same information beam that emanates from the center of the sun and, before that, from the center of our galactic core. Our essential spirit identity is one with our Creator, the unnameable, the prime source, Mother, Father, God-sciousness, who sends but one primal identity beam through the galaxy, through each star, into each world, and into each incarnated soul, differentiating like light through crystal layers as it flows, taking ever more specific, focused form, yet remaining one light in essence, originating in one source, one prime Creator God-sciousness. We come from the stars, knowing within us the wisdom of the One, knowing the source of every star is the all that is. Aligned with our innermost sense of self, flowing uniquely into our spirit lives, the eternal self individualizes. We come as a family of luminous beings, as a tribe of light, love, and truth. We come awakening now in increasing numbers throughout the gentle ones, the lovers of this earth. Those in whom we awaken understand these things in terms quite different from those whom we are still courting from afar. They feel in their bones the changing of the times, and they know that it is good. As this current wave of consciousness slowly fills the conceptual atmosphere of this planet, more and more people look up from their daily affairs to notice that their society's understanding of the world is neither complete nor accurate. There are some who shrink away from these lies, but properly understood, it is a source of joy and not of fear. The perspective to which we call is one of wholeness. It is the vision that sees, behind the changes of these times, an eternal presence slowly filling the fields of human consciousness. A holy presence, the presence that inspires life itself. Those who embrace this vision are both more comfortable and more effective in the areas where human goods, services, and ideas are exchanged. Their lives are rooted in a sense of peace that weathers well the temporal storms. They use their skills and their insight to prepare the way for the change in commercial and political spheres that must come. And as this wave of awakening continues to unfold, their peace continues to deepen. How could it be otherwise? They bring peace to all they encounter. We address those locked in historical perspectives as best we can, transmitting our information through those of resonant transduction in whom we are able to incarnate occasionally, not necessarily full-time, but long enough to create a work of art, a song, a motion picture, an article, a documentary. As electronic communication devices help to alert more people to the deeper currents of perception within themselves, our transmission of higher frequency consciousness increasingly takes the form of radiant light energy beamed directly into human awareness. People turn again to the historically neglected flow of information through collective human consciousness, even as that flow is itself being amplified, even as its warmer, love-centered informational currents infiltrate the cooler currents of compartmentalized, egoic, fear-based thought. From the clouds from which some will perceive cosmic Christ consciousness falling, insight falls like spring rain upon a winter landscape, melting the snows, the prejudice, the illusions of centuries, gathering all in the waters of truth, and flowing on to warm the currents of a historical river where remnants of ideology bob like blocks of ice, slowly melting, bumping, slowly dissolving, and finally disappearing forever. The warm rains of new thought fall steadily upon the fields of human consciousness, bringing warmth, light, growth, and radiant energy. Awakening individual droplets appear from everywhere, it seems, to form powerful new currents, new rivers, new streams. As more people attune to the higher frequencies of awareness, the current swells and flows. New thought, new vision, new perspectives are shared and actualized. Waters, spirits, and love rise. A new information age is released upon the world, but not before its industrial underpinnings magnify human blind spots and give to humankind unprecedented options and unprecedented power. Problems will intensify. Authoritarian control will crumble. True democracy glows like a morning star. Literacy explodes in the growing light. Communication technology proliferates, stimulating, awakening, reaching deep into currents and undercurrents of human thought, where but a moment ago perception was clouded and curtailed. At first there is little conscious awareness of what is occurring, but there is an inexplicable feeling, a subliminal sense of something wonderful bubbling beneath the crust of culturally enforced perception. Some associate this with a vague conception of God, but few suspect the immensity of the event that is before them as this new consciousness, aware, alert, active, flows like a tide into the very core of their societies, into the very minds and hearts of everyone. The majority of human beings have not yet thought of reality in broad enough terms to see what is happening. Their belief systems are too constricted. They allow no breadth, no scope, no room for comprehension. The possibility that human history may be reaching a climax, a completion, a moment of fulfillment, has occurred to only a few. That all that has gone before might be merely the gestational cycle of the developing planetary intelligence is too large a concept, too broad a vision for those cloaked in cultural bias and the historical fear-based processing to even imagine. However, a rapidly growing minority with significant global influence has sensed that there is more to current political and economic trends than is typically acknowledged by the world's societies. These people have seen flickering movements on the other side of the linguistic curtain that hangs between them, and a clear view of reality. They have begun to attune to inner levels of being. These awakening individuals are not centered in any one city or nation. They do not belong to any one race or denomination. Without any linear, superficial organization, they are looking up and noticing, appearing, incarnating wherever people love. Often, the initial phase of their awakening is more emotional than conceptual, but that is enough to allow the coordinated thought and sensation of unified being to flow into them and their decision-making. They may not fully understand it mentally, but they feel something, experience something, a growing sense of love and common unity between all. They have tapped into the new way of being. They act on it, they trust it, and it works. There are many individuals now entering positions of global influence who are doing so because they have sensed, often without complete conceptual understanding, that the old ways of consuming information are neither working nor necessary, that there are new and more effective methods of intuitively tapping into living reservoirs of pure information, and they are acting on intuition rather than logic. These people, without any unifying ideology, are finding themselves in strategic positions overseeing primary systems of planetary energy and information exchange and human social organization. This is on purpose. When the moment of quantum awakening arrives, and shortly before it, these people will be guided from within to act in ways that will minimize disruption of the systems that provide human populations with life's necessities. Before the moment of collective awakening, they will receive full understanding of what they must do. They will know themselves as cells, terminals. There is not yet an adequate term. Biologically incarnate focal points of the same loving awareness that brings them and their species to life. Throughout more generations of your ancestors than you are able to remember, informational beings of the angelic order have been moving within historical circuits, guiding the development of your cultures and your institutions. These angels have been influencing the evolution of your civilizational deities, filters, and prejudices, so that one day these deities, filters, and prejudices themselves would convince you to look up into your spiritual reality. Our educational goals. Since some 3,000 years before the birth of Yeshua ben Yusuf, the Christ, the most effective components of our educational strategy have been avenues of communication related to sports, agriculture, and music. Recently, physics, electronics, and other contemporary fields have also entered the picture. However, regardless of the language we speak, and each of these fields provides us with a language of sorts, our educational goals remain the same. Our task is to demonstrate the superiority of present moment, life-centered awareness over awareness clouded by fear. We work to shift human interest gradually away from defensive, survival-oriented lifestyles toward the pursuit of excellence. We are only able to influence people in areas where their hearts are at least somewhat open and where a passionate interest is present. We are not interested in changing minds. Minds always follow the passions of the heart. We are interested in opening hearts. Our educational vehicles must contrast the advantages of love-centered living with the mediocrity of mere survival, which is the best that fear-centered living claims to offer. They must graphically demonstrate the benefits of the motivation of love as opposed to the motivation of fear, illustrating the superiority of cooperation over conflict, negotiation over confrontation, forgiveness over revenge, present moment awareness over perception filtered through the past. They must show these as superior methods of achieving human goals and interests. Since the day when we first challenged Sumerian warriors to see who could hurl their spears the farthest instead of hurling them at each other, we have utilized the vehicle of sports to harness the currents of human aggression and channel them into more creative activity. As human aggression is channeled into athletic competition, a subtle shift in values occurs. In many cultures, it has taken generations for this shift to produce new patterns of accepted social behavior, but ultimately the shift does come. In this century, the most significant transformations in human consciousness have occurred on the playing fields of the world, in stadiums and swimming pools, on basketball courts and skating rinks, in streets, in backlots and alleys. Here the majority of human beings first encounter their instinctual natures. Wherever human aggression can be released upon the playing field, channeled into a game of competition and teamwork, where skills are pitted against skills, and where all abide by commonly agreed upon rules, the collective reservoir of human emotional energy releases the pent-up steam of potential violence, and that particular tendency toward violence is then removed from circulation. The transmutation of aggressive energy is one of several functions served by physical sports. Another is to agree upon rules that are in mutual interests of two opposing sides or teams. Rules that are to everyone's advantage to learn and obey. A basic lesson, perhaps, but a significant watershed in each individual's cycle of awakening. Team sports go beyond individual sports by encouraging players to think first of the team, the greater whole, and to help other players succeed. They call upon athletes to perfect the physical capabilities of the human body and to help others do the same. Some sports do more than merely transmute aggression. Baseball offers a state-of-the-art educational context. On the diamond, historical blind spots are penalized, while the psychological and emotional skills essential to universal species are rewarded. Those of us who are guiding humankind through the educational process that precede awakening do occasionally channel our energy through the structures of organized religion, when the motives of those involved originate in love and their intentions are for the common good. Despite our best intentions, attempts to organize spirituality almost always fall back upon themselves, masking the spirit and occasionally even flipping over to become the embodiment of whatever they oppose. By their nature, spiritual organizations, like religions, are superfluous. They seek to do what is already done. A successful church would be short-term, transitional, a stepping stone toward cosmic consciousness, not a rock upon which generations duplicate the mistakes of the past. To orient your life around a structure or some other human being's understanding is to worship a false god. It is to lock yourself into a framework of someone else's prejudice, however well-intentioned. It is to prefer the past-oriented knowledge of another to your own present moment perception. It is to doubt both yourself and the Creator who would, if you permit it, awaken within you. So it has been written, They stand in God's presence, yet see only their idols. Their eyes look upon images of beauty engraved in stone and in the faces of coins, yet they do not see the living beauty of their brothers and sisters all around them. Those who orient their lives around human organizations are left with little happiness and less satisfaction. They are like mice on a treadmill of self-validating and self-defeating beliefs. Until they choose to step off the treadmill, there is little we can do to reach them. For they alone have the right to determine how they will understand themselves and their world, and they have the freedom to maintain the world they have chosen, however restrictive it is. We can only shepherd such people from afar, as we have shepherded human beings throughout history, breaking up their routines when appropriate to give them opportunities to look at the world from larger perspectives. But we cannot compel change. No lasting change is ever wrought from without. These days we find a few individuals in every community who begin to suspect that there might be something beyond their culture's understanding of reality. When this occurs, we have a breakthrough. These people we can and do reach. Generally, it is then only a short time before these first to awaken translate their new awareness into terms better suited than ours to convey it to others still locked within their particular brand of illusion, thereby helping to awaken them also. In historical societies, this is the prime function of art. As artistic insight gradually sifts down through the numerous layers of tradition, its essence at last reaches the level of politics. Then transformation happens rapidly, at times too rapidly. You saw something of this process at work during the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Russian Revolution. With too few awakened ones consciously involved in the process, we succeeded in lighting the fires of love for freedom, but we failed to control the flames. There are always random factors in any social upheaval, the degree of uncertainty increasing in proportion to the rate and extent of change. Disruption is not always negative, however. A day provides a welcome disruption of night. A star disrupts the surface of nearby worlds. Biological life disrupts the otherwise steady slumber of inorganic molecules. As clear currents of higher awareness flow ever more freely among human thought, the murky biases of yesterday are disrupted, loosened, and washed away. Introduce these currents we must, but always our goal is to do so as gently and harmoniously as possible. We release the energy of new awareness into spheres of human tradition where it is vital, but people alone and the choices they make in their moments and hours can determine whether the resulting transformations are graceful or traumatic. The currents of thought we bring are no more stationary than the sap of a living tree in the midsummer sun, or the pulse of a being in love. The words that have been assigned to our thought currents today may appear in printed pages tomorrow as triggers, memory catalysts, or sparks to ignite and renew awareness. But words, no matter how wonderful, are never the truth. Truth is eternal, and verbal representations are not. They live and grow and change like the herbs and grasses along the banks of a stream, like the water flowing by. The perspectives we share in these transmissions are formulations of an eternal stream of consciousness. They are meaningful for a moment, perhaps for a day, for some people. They provide a place of understanding where you can rest as you move forward on your homeward journey. They are stepping stones appearing before you to take you across the stream of consciousness, from the subconscious shore where you have floundered in the marshes and swamplands of history, to the conscious shore where you are aware of the singularity of consciousness you knew before you became a human. As you move across the stream, you notice something strange and beautiful. Each new gain in comprehension brings a corresponding reduction of complexity. You become simpler as you become wiser, until the day arrives when once again your inner standing is your own, no longer polluted with what you have been told or what you have heard, but fresh as a new perception, pure as a mountain spring, as clear as the eyes of a divine child.